In part one of the Trinity UFO case, we gave you the story. 2 kids in New Mexico see a UFO crash land in the desert, living aliens, a government cover-up. Finally, they tell their story decades later. In part 2, we take a hard look at that story and see if it can stand up to scrutiny. That's next.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weird World Podcast. I'm Carrie.
Hi, I'm Dean.
Dean, this is part 2.
Part 2.
Are you going to give us a quick
Not really. I mean,
okay.
the first part, we talked about the story, and then we talked about how it became a story. Not the evolution of the story, that comes now, but how it became a thing in terms of gaining public attention and was brought to the attention of the world. The story being the Trinity UFO case, where these 2 kids in 1945,
7 and 9
years old, maybe
out riding horses on their own.
Also maybe
Taking care of the ranch.
probably. Okay. So they saw this UFO crash land, and they went to it, saw an alien in there. They looked humanoid, but had kind of an insect vibe to them, a little bit of a strange hybrid kind of a sense to them. They made some noises, they made some sounds, and the government covered it up.
Of course.
And they finally had the courage to tell their tale. Literally many, many decades, like 60 years later, did they really start telling their tale in a very public way. And since it's become, it's not one of the top UFO stories, but it's up there. It gets bandied about. It's in the conference, circuit for UFO conventions and events and things like that. And it's become, and one of the most prominent UFO researchers of all time has championed it, Jacques Vallée. So today we're going to start with, we're really going to cover 2 things. One, like I mentioned in the tease, kind of a really hard scrutiny of this story in all its details, but also the people telling the story and the people who have advocated the story as well. And then we'll kind of, we'll come to our own conclusions on how valid the story is. So as I mentioned, the Trinity case has become kind of a talking point specifically for UFO visitations, because it is a close encounter of the third kind, where there is human-alien direct contact, or at least, visual close contact with actual aliens here on Earth with us. As our brief history last time showed, it kind of started being told publicly in about 2003 or so, nearly 60 years after it was supposedly happened. It percolated over the next decade or so. Got that remember the small town newspaper coverage? There was a mention in a UFO book, a little bit of other, it kind of started just welling up, and people in the really close to the UFO scene had heard about it, knew about it. It was in a self-published book in 2011, and then more prominently in about 2021 and reissued in 2022. Paolo Harris and Jacques Vallée wrote a book about this.
Right. I remember Paolo.
That's 76 years, by the way. 76 years, it really got really became more toward the forefront of the UFO world. So kind of a good thing. They were just little kids back in 1945. One's dead. The other one's still, Jose Padilla is still alive.
Is he the 7-year-old?
No, Remy Baca was a 7-year-old in 2013.
Oh, rest in peace, Remy.
Yeah. But to that point, the only coverage of the case had been until very recently in these obviously very friendly sources. An old friend who's a journalist, and then nothing but strong UFO enthusiasts and advocates after that. Until more recently, last year or two, a researcher named Douglas Dean Johnson. He's a researcher, writer, who frequently writes about UFOs. He does so, I don't know if I call him a skeptic, but he's just a thorough, actual, legitimate journalist who looks at sources and checks things, something that is going to turn out. Jacques Vallée and Paolo Harris didn't do a very good job of when they wrote their book. They effectively took Padilla and Baca, well, by that time just Padilla, at his word, although Baca had told the story. Remember, they wrote a book before Baca died, and also another witness to this event that we haven't heard from yet, but we're going to hear from a little later. A surprise witness, like it's a great jury trial.
Okay.
So Johnson decided he'd take a look at the validity of the Trinity story as it had come to be told in those now, kind of let's call that the official story, the current version, the version really set up by Jacques Vallée and Paolo Harris with their book in 2021 and again the reissue in 22. Was there any backing for it? who were these witnesses? These both small boys at the time. Also the adults, Faustino Padilla, Jose's father, and Trooper Eddie Apodaca. Did the story hang together? Was there something to this story? So he said, I'm going to look at actual sources. I'm going to talk to people who have talked to them, etc. So when he really got into it, and when you read Johnson's research and his work, you see there's kind of 4 core areas where this wonderful story gets a little shaky. And those areas are the reliability of the witnesses, how the story changed and evolved over time. I've hinted at that.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. And this late edition of this, a pretty highly unlikely and unreliable supposed witness that injected himself into the story after it had been already public. And then the fourth being kind of what we're going to see is a pretty crystal clear motivation for why Jose and Remy were telling the story. So let's start with the witnesses. Before we get to the 2 most critical witnesses, Jose and Remy, of course, let's take a little detour into the 4th witness. Because you think about it, this is the boys, they told their dad, and the dad later told the state trooper Eddie Apodaca, and Apodaca went with the 3 of them to the crash site 2 days after it occurred, because as you recall, they had chores the day after. So we do this because tellingly, it was impossible for Eddie Apodaca to have been anywhere near Trinity in August of 1945. In fact, it was impossible for him to have even been in New Mexico. In fact, it was impossible for him to have even been in the United States of America. So in the different versions of this story, Apodaca is sometimes just some random state cop, the way they tell it, but sometimes he's kind of a friend of the family, and he had known Faustino Padilla for a few years. And it was Faustino who called him in to investigate, right? That's what Remy said in the 2011 book. He identified Eddie Apodaca as a family friend, and that Faustino had called him. That appears to be true. There was someone that they knew. I don't know how close they were, but he was a state trooper that they knew. And Johnson, the researcher, he found that Eddie Apodaca was indeed an officer with the New York State Police at about roughly in this period, let's say loosely.
Yeah.
But the timing is pretty important. He did work in Socorro County, and the Padillas and the Bacas knew him, so all that checks out. The problem was he was not a state police officer in 1945 when they said this occurred. In fact, he did not begin working for the New York State Police until 1951, almost 5.5 years after the alien crash landing was said to have occurred.
Where was he in 45?
He was in Europe because he was with the Army for World War II. And they know that he was in the Army, they know what unit he was in, and they know his unit was in Europe. They didn't come back until about 3 months after these events happened in August of 1945. So, absolutely impossible. Wasn't a state trooper, was in the Army, was in Europe, cannot have had anything to do. In fact, again, wasn't a state trooper until 5.5 years later. Just impossible for him to have been there. But he was someone who knew the family. So the obvious conclusion is that Jose and Remy saw, if we inject an official, a law enforcement person into this, it's going to give us some authenticity, some realism, I guess. And Apodaca.
But that's weird, though, that they would pick somebody who wasn't even in law enforcement in their state.
Think about it. It was 60 years ago when you're saying this story.
Yeah.
You don't remember exactly when he became a cop. You just know that you knew this state cop a little bit. Your family knew him. Your dad knew this guy.
Yeah.
You remember him. You remember his name. He was over at the house once or twice. And hey, we can put him in the story. He was a state cop. Remember a state cop, Apodaca? Yeah, I remember him. Let's put him in the story. Again, we're going to find out. These guys, they're not great at inventing details, it turns out. So I think they did it for an air of authenticity, and they just fouled it up 60 years later when they told this story. They screwed it up. He died in 2008, I believe, Apodaca. So when it really became truly prominent, which was 2009 and 10, remember they went on Coast to Coast Radio, and then they wrote their book. He was dead. Yeah. That was convenient. The story, they had still told the story to the local newspaper guy, and his name does appear in that. I could find nothing that Apodaca said. What the hell are they talking about? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if he was very old by 2003 when that story came out in that little newspaper. He may have never even seen it, or if he did, I don't know. I don't know what his condition was at the time.
Yeah.
So it's pretty devastating. That's not great that you made up the one kind of official figure that was supposedly and also a witness just 2 days later.
Yeah.
So it's troublesome. It means that everything they said involving Apodaca has to have been a lie, effectively, because Apodaca wasn't there.
Right.
Unless they just, they invented a memory of him being there, and everything else is the same. Their dad was there and they were there, but that's pretty unlikely.
Mm-hmm.
So everything, the debris field, him and his dad, the two of them going into the spaceship. Remember coming out 5 or 10 minutes later and kind of shaken. The whole thing about Sergeant Avila, because remember Sergeant Avila, the guy from the army who said, "Hey, we gotta go, use your land and go get that weather balloon." Apodaca was with them. The implication is that Apodaca was the one who must have told the army. So, but there's no Apodaca, so that can't have happened. So it pokes holes in multiple parts of the story.
Yeah.
This is not a good start, is what I'm saying, to our scrutiny of the Baca Padilla story. It does, of course, get worse. So let's turn to Remy Baca. It is likely that Baca was the initial inspiration for the story, or, it was probably kind of his thing, I think, because in adulthood, he became a UFO enthusiast. He and his wife thought they saw a UFO in about 1994 or so, and they joined MUFON, which is the Mutual UFO Network. It's an organization that researches UFO cases and takes them down and catalogs them and enumerates them, and occasionally actually will investigate them. Historically, it actually did some really good work. Less so lately. Like all of those kinds of groups, nowadays they tend to be just believers and not early. I think I've said this before. Early psychic research was very serious, and they would poke holes.
Yeah,
and they would find frauds all the time. Now they're on Discovery Channel. Going, well, what was that? Did you feel that? It's a ghost. So it's a different world we live in, and MUFON has kind of followed that. I would argue. And so, but anyway, Baca became a pretty strong UFO advocate. But Baca also kind of had a little problem with the truth. Apparently, to provide himself, I think, with an air to authenticity or importance, when he joined, he started becoming involved with the local MUFON in New Mexico. He told them of an event that had happened to him when he was living in Washington State in the 1970s. Baca said that he was the key aide, a top political aide, and kind of almost a campaign kingpin for the governor of Washington, Dixie Lee Ray. She was elected governor, I believe, in 76, I think. And
that's interesting.
And so he said he was like, I was a big campaign advisor for her. I pretty much got her elected. He was like the guy who delivered the Latino vote in Washington or something like that, but also was like a top aide, right, to the governor of Washington. Not bad, right? Mm-hmm. In that capacity, he said that he had been, or actually Dixie Lee Ray had been approached by a member of the Atomic Energy Commission, the AEC, which was that oversaw atomic power and was a pretty important organization at the time.
Yeah.
And that person had leaked to Governor Ray a top secret file about, the Trinity UFO case. Here's a document that said this thing was real. The government investigated it. The government covered up the story. Mm-hmm. Why Governor Ray, you might ask? Well, she had been the first chairperson of the AEC, or the chairperson of the AEC from 1973 to 1975. Oh. So she was well connected. So it was someone she knew or worked with earlier. Defined spending the rest of his life in federal prison by giving her a top secret document. But she did so that they must have known, hey, you're a top kingpin aide, Remy Baca. He was a witness. He's in this. So here's this story, Governor Ray. She then showed it to Baca, also something that would get her in jail for the rest of her life. Uh-huh. But here you have it. You have this official document that seemingly proves the government had been involved in the case. But hey, he was the guy. She owed it to him. She showed him the file. She let him know how right he was. Obviously, there's no evidence there's anything like this ever happened. It is also hard to believe, though, because Baca is apparently a pathological liar, because he had none of this is true. He did not work for her. He never worked in any political capacity whatsoever for Dixie Lee Ray. He was, in fact, a low-level tax compliance clerk at the State Department of Revenue. He had nothing whatsoever to do with the governor's office. Almost certainly never even spoke to Dixie Lee Ray. He lifted the whole campaign stuff, and apparently in parts verbatim from a guy named Louis Guzzo, who was Dixie Lee Ray's top campaign advisor, political advisor. He just stole that guy's story, applied it to himself,
and added the whole
AEC report, all to impress, apparently to either impress MUFON or more likely to sell that story. So just a crazy self-aggrandizing lie. So we know Remy Baca can torture the truth. What about Jose Padilla? Got to be a credible guy.
Not Jose.
Sigh. The story is much the same. Actually, it's probably worse. Padilla told that old friend reporter Ben Moffitt that he had signed up with the New Mexico National Guard, that he had spent time with New Mexico National Guard. Again, it's probably to, hey, I'm official, I'm legit, I'm credible. The problem was that he said he had signed up when he was 13 years old. And I guess Moffitt maybe said, wait, let me do the math here. Hold on, that doesn't make sense. He said, no. At the time, the state National Guard was allowing 13-year-olds
sure,
National Guard. So it was okay.
That's believable.
With them. It's a little unlikely. So
a
little bit. Johnson, just to make sure, but Johnson's a very thorough researcher. He decided to look into that. He found that, no, there was no policy.
Yes,
like that.
of
Like
course.
a 17-year-old could you had to be 18, and a 17-year-old could, with a parent's signature or something like that, but 13.
Yeah.
No. He also exhaustively checked the roster of the State National Guard and even the State Air National Guard. Like, hey, maybe he made a mistake. Maybe he should have said Air National Guard.
Right.
But he checked both, going way, way back, just to be safe, and found no record of Jose Padilla ever having served.
Did he check Boy Scout Troop 200? Because maybe he was a Boy Scout.
Not to, at 30, yeah, that's true. But that's less credible, I think, than a National Guards person.
Or what are they at 13? Weebelows?
I don't know. They have great names, though. Padilla also told Jacques Vallée and Paola Harris about his military service in the Korean War.
Uh-oh.
So again, pretty credible, right? That sounds legit. Even suffering a wound. He was shot and he held that bullet and it bothered him still. I guess he would say, that's my old war wound. Like in 2020 when they're interviewing him before they published their book, he would limp and say, yeah, that's my bullet in there, still in there from the Korean War when I served my country. He would have been 13 years old when the war started and about 16 years old when the war ended.
That's a very bad thing to do.
Yeah. It's called stolen valor.
It's
not okay.
Very frowned upon.
It's despicable.
Yeah.
So as with the State National Guard, there's absolutely, again, Johnson checked, no record whatsoever of Padilla on the casualty list from the Korean War. So it was an exhaustive, everybody who was wounded or killed in the Korean War is on the list.
Yeah.
He's not on that list. Maybe he had the wound. I don't know. When he was a 14-year-old or 15-year-old serving in Korea. I don't know. But you're thinking that's it. We've got enough on Padilla. Well, wait, there's more. He also told the entirely credulous Vallée and Harris. By the way, they report this straight up. All these things are true. Even the story about the Dixie Lee Ray thing. In their book is that, they report it as straight up fact, which shows
zero fact checking on their part
fact checking
at
whatsoever. I mean, literally zero. They did have, we'll learn later, the artifact. Remember the metal kind of brace, that foot long piece of metal? They did have that kind of checked, but you'll see.
I mean,
it's hilarious. So Padilla told them that he had been in the California Highway Patrol. Again, I'm official, I'm law enforcement, I'm credible, you can believe me. That's clearly what he's trying to do, I think.
But also, sorry, no, and no.
Well,
it doesn't make you any more credible.
No, but you can see how a lot of folks would think that, and he thought that.
It's a big thing because when you go to jury duty, when they're doing jury selection, they make a point to ask you if there is a uniformed cop on the stand. Would you give any more weight to his credibility?
Really?
Would you consider him to be more honest and trustworthy just because?
And if you say yes, are you off the jury?
Probably.
I'm going to say yes every time.
I mean, who's going to.
Damn.
I mean, it's the defense that's not going to want you.
Or I can just shout out guilty randomly, and it's going to be something. I am gay. Does that get you off anymore? Padilla said he was in he was a chip, as they call him here in California, as you know.
Everybody knows chips.
They were on TV.
Ponch and John,
Eric Estrada, and the other guy. He said, had a second bullet from when he was a chip. And he caught it while capturing a criminal, and that bullet was still in him as well. No one's going to, I'm probably, doing metal detectors in his body, I hope. This supposed experience in fact, was the key reason that Valle and Harris felt Padilla was such a credible witness. They did believe that his service in these law enforcement organizations, National Guard and the CHIPS, made him credible. So they would have flunked a jury test like that.
It makes sense that people think that.
Media coverage of the case has routinely accepted the story. They even call him Officer Padilla in some newspaper coverage. It's really, I mean, there's no, again, just because somebody says this, when somebody especially is peddling, a difficult to believe story, you should automatically, your ears should prick up for any detail, especially details that seem to kind of add authority to them or gild the lily or something like that. This clearly does that. It was intended to do that. And it's not hard to check. Johnson, again, checked it. There's no record of Jose Padilla being a chip or working for in any capacity, not even of the Highway Patrol whatsoever. And by the way, how tall do you think Jose Padilla is as an adult?
5'7".
5'3".
Oh,
that's a full 6 inches too short to be in the CHIPS at the time he said he was a member of the California Highway Patrol. They had a 5'9" height limit at the time. I mean, just you're not going to fake that.
I think we have an explanation for the whole thing.
Yeah.
Short man syndrome.
Maybe. Padilla's own son, Sammy Padilla, has spoken about how deceitful his dad has been. He said, quote, he builds himself bigger and bigger, end quote. And he blamed it on a cousin. They had a cousin, I do know the name, I won't say it, but there was a cousin who became a big believer, and she was just like feeding Jose. In the mid-'90s, she was feeding him a bunch of like, hey, yeah, you should tell this story, and we'll make some money off it. They'll make a movie.
Yeah.
Come on, Uncle Jose. And his son was pretty pissed off at her, and there's a bit of a family split because of this. He said that she had, quote, feeding him garbage and she was motivated by, quote, looking for a handout. So I think she wanted to cash in on it.
Huh. Well, good.
There's like body cam evidence that I guess the police came to his house for some reason, and about this, and he's telling them this body cam footage of him telling the cops, like, yeah, my dad lies a lot. He lied about this whole Trinity case, and he said, for instance, he has said later that he's deaf in one ear, right? And this has been true forever. And
old war wound?
No, it was when the blast occurred, the actual atomic bomb blast, that deafened him in one ear. It deafened no one else.
Yeah.
The people, not even the observers were deafened, but Jose was. And his son goes, no, everybody in my family knows what happened. He was 3 years old, and he got something in his ear, and a doctor was trying to dislodge it, but the doctor was drunk. So I guess it punctured his eardrum, and he deafened him. So
my God.
And the whole family knows that. And yet here he is telling these writers, Harris and Valle, that, oh yeah, that happened with Trinity. Just, I don't know, just to be an interesting detail. He sounds like he's literally just a fabulist.
Yeah.
He just makes stuff up.
Say he's a Baron Munchausen.
Yeah, he is. The upshot of this research that Johnson did and others is that not only is there zero positive evidence for Padilla and Baca's story, but there's obviously clear evidence that they are both very deceitful people. Perhaps the clearest evidence, though, that the story is untrue, though, is how the story has changed and evolved over time, often in pretty hugely and importantly contradictory ways. So we're going to turn to that next, the changing story, let's call it. The Baca Padilla story was first, remember, it was kind of, they may have told a few family members or locals as early as the mid to late 90s. They may have started talking about it, right? In 2002 and 2003, they started telling people outside that circle about it. It was 2003, as you recall, when Moffat published his stories in the local newspaper. But in 2002, or late 2002, early 2003, they contacted a UFO researcher in an attempt to get him interested in writing a book about the alleged event. That turns out to be critical because that person taped multiple phone calls with Padilla and Baca and and also took notes. He didn't tape every minute of their conversations, but he also took notes as well. So what we're going to do is look at that earliest version, 2002, 2003, and compare it to the official version that's now. Basically, the version that comes out in the book by Harris and Valle. Right? You remember Baca and Padilla wrote their book themselves in 2011, and most of that survived the telling now. Not all of it. So there's changes even from that. But we're going to focus on the kind of the early and the now kind of versions of the story. So, and the early version was told, we know from the UFO researcher's name I mentioned is Thomas Carey. And so he and Doug Johnson talked to him recently in the last couple of year or two, and actually was able to find those tapes. Carrie's like, I don't know where they are.
Yeah.
But this sparked Carrie, like, I got to find those goddamn tapes. And he found his notes and he found his tapes, and he sent a tape of the tapes to Doug Johnson. And Doug Johnson was just poured over it in tremendous detail. And again, so there's just, here's just a few of the discrepancies that Johnson has called, again, comparing the now story, in this case, mostly with Carrie's, what the story that Padilla and Baca told Carrie back in 2002 and 2003. We know, of course, this is famous because this is called the Trinity story because it occurred just after the explosion of the Trinity bomb in 1945.
Right.
Well, not so much in the initial story that he told Carrie and others. He first said it happened in 1946, a year later, which seems kind of huge, but it wasn't just a slip up. They said this 4 times to Carrie, and Baca even says at one point, quote, it had been about a year since the bomb, unquote. So it wasn't a mistake.
Yeah.
Their initial story had this happen a year later than the official version. So weird contradiction number 1. There are even some slight age differences. He's usually reported as the boys were were ages 9 and 7, right?
Right.
Because that's what they've said. But the Valley Harris book has them now 8 and 6, a year younger each. It seems to me the reason is because they needed it to be back in 1945.
Right.
So in 1946, when they start telling the story, it's 1946. So they say they're 9 and 7.
Yeah.
Later versions have it be 1945 because of the Trinity,
Yeah.
it glommed onto that monumental event. So they have to backtrack and say, no, we were 8 and 6, which makes him even more. He's driving a pickup truck at 8 now, okay?
Probably not.
So I think that's what's going on here. Somewhere along the line, they wanted to make the story more interesting because of its proximity to Trinity, and so they tied it to the explosion, and they changed the date. So in the original story, the 2 boys, as you know, traveled on horses, right?
Right.
In the original story, they told Thomas Carey they went out there in a truck.
Oh.
They drove the truck out there because remember, whether Jose was 8 or 9 years old, he was
driving,
sure as hell driving trucks.
Sure.
And he could absolutely reach the pedals and see over the dashboard. This small child who, as you recall, as an adult, grew to 5'3". So what was he then? 3'1" at 8 or 9?
A 5'3" person probably has some trouble. I'm assuming it's a big truck. I mean, it's not some
kind of farm truck.
Yeah.
1945. I have no idea.
It's a full size truck.
Yeah.
I mean,
maybe he was an early bloomer.
Well, I mean, I know somebody who could drive at 9.
So,
but
one pickup truck becomes 2 stories in the later tellings. That's just individually. These are unlikely to be mistakes, or impossible to be mistakes, but they start piling up. So, in the first,
mistakes about a story that happened when you're a young child are not impossible to believe.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't negate the entire story. This is a pretty far-fetched story to begin with.
Yes, but we're just, trust me, there's more.
Yes, yeah.
So in the first version, the pregnant cow is still a thing. In later stories, they actually said, though, their main goal was to head out to the site because they wanted to get some Trinity, because it was just after, remember, the Trinity thing. So again, they really wanted to tie it to Trinity.
Yeah.
They probably felt that was a good hook. Remember their book was called, what was it called again? Born in the Shadow of whatever.
Yeah.
They really tied it to Trinity. That clearly is a later edition. And so they set it back 1 year, and they changed their story from being just to go get a pregnant cow to going out there to look for Trinity.
Okay.
So another modest change. They also sent about looking to fix some fences in the version 1.
Yes, because 6 and 8 year olds, or even 7 and 9 year olds, good.
That I actually can believe.
To fix a fence? No,
sure, just little fence 1. I have no idea. So,
I mean, could you fix a fence at your age?
I can't fix a fence now, as you know. So
that's what I just said.
That's not fair.
I said at your age.
So we know how they found. Remember the UFO? Remember it soared over them, made a big noise. They saw the explosion over a ridge. They went over the ridge and they saw it there and went blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
In that original version, they told Carrie, none of that. None of that. They didn't hear a thing, didn't see a thing. They just came over a ridge, looked down and said, oh my God, there's an already crashed spacecraft down there. Oh my goodness, let's go check it out. Again, that's not a misremember. That's and you notice what these are. All these things add to the story.
Right.
They add to the drama. They add to the impact. Nothing is going, it was much more mundane than that. Nothing's doing that. It's all adding. No screeching, no blazing, whatever. They didn't witness a crash. They stumbled onto it in the original telling. They were, they're getting better at the story is what they're doing. They're adding things. When they saw the first craft, by the way, remember the shape of it? Remember they said it was avocado shaped?
Right.
It was a traditional disc in the initial story. A straight up round disc, no avocado shape whatsoever. Disc, as you recall, have been kind of the big go-to for a long time. So at some point, they wanted to make the shape, I think, more interesting. So they made it avocado shape. But initially it's perfectly round. And it was also, they said, and remember, they're not telling these stories as a kid. So if they're misremembering things completely differently from the first time they're telling it to the later times they tell it. So that's not the same thing as misremember as a kid. So they're telling Thomas Carey in 2002 and 3 that it was a disc, not an avocado, and that it was 30 to 45 feet wide and 5 feet thick. Their later telling has it be, as you might recall, 25 to 30 feet wide and 14 feet high.
Right.
So we're not done with how the shape of it changed because it also grew. Remember that sunlight, that skylight or whatever?
Yeah.
That wasn't there in the initial version. And they initially said that it looked like it had lights on the bottom. Those got lost in later versions. Since it was crashed, I'm not sure how they thought they saw lights on the bottom, but it changed in a number of ways. And again, I want to stress, it's their adults saying these things in 2002 and adults saying these very, very different things in 2020 or so.
Yeah.
So in the modern official version, the today version, the boys reported seeing aliens through that big hole in the craft, as you recall. They provided a very detailed description of these humanoid creatures that had some insect aspects to them. And remember, they said they moved really weird. They heard some kind of squealing sounds. None of that's in the original story. They apparently saw them only from a distance because they said they kind of a glimpse of them, kind of a shadowy glimpse of them, and they, quote, looked like bugs. That's about it.
Yeah.
They weren't nearly they became much more humanoid. They described much more detail and actions and sounds and things like that were not there in the first. And you're not going to, they were talking to Carrie for hours.
Yeah.
You're not going to not say those things that are critical parts of your story. So I don't know. My guess is what happened here is that they said they initially said like bugs, but then they made them more humanoid because let's be honest, everybody writes humanoid. No one's doing Starship Trooper insects. Everybody's doing humanoid grays. So they made them much more gray-like, but still kept this. Remember this like, oh, they're humanoid. Oh, but they reminded us of praying mantises. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
That's a glom on. They were kind of stuck with that. They should have just dropped the whole initial thing, but they had already told Carrie that they looked like bugs, so they couldn't. That's my guess.
Yeah.
The first story had the kids, along with Faustino and a then unnamed state trooper, returning to the crash site, and they had them going the very next day, not 2 days later. Minor discrepancies, and maybe they didn't. Apodaca, they didn't use his name initially. That's believable, but forgetting the day and then being so certain that you did it 2 days later, not 1 day later, that's not great. They went out there with Faustino and Apodaca 2 days later, and those guys went into the craft, spent 5 or 10 minutes. Right. Everything was there. In the first version, the craft has been essentially partially buried by dirt.
Right.
He said somebody had, quote, thrown dirt over it. And so both Faustino, Jose's dad, and the trooper, the unnamed trooper, they never go anywhere near it. They never see anything. They never go inside the craft at all. They just saw kind of a shape and they went home. Yeah. That's it. Very, very, very different telling. Finally, there was the acquisition of that all-important metal artifact, as you recall, that supposed piece of editing technology, a key part of Jose Padilla's story. And Jose Padilla we'll see in a minute what he does with that. The first version, though, has the two boys waiting for the soldiers to leave their truck loaded with crash debris, but it's in town. It's in San Antonio because they went to like socialize. So they probably went to that bar. I can't remember the name of the bar. Yeah. So that essentially has them parking the truck in town and going into the bar, leaving it completely unattended, and they just sort of grabbed a piece of debris from it real quickly, just from the like scattered debris on this particular truck. We recall now that the official version has them parking it at the crash site.
Yeah.
is the entire spaceship covered by a tarp, and inexplicably, every single
They
soldier
leave.
leaves that. And then Jose goes into the craft and remember, pries the piece of metal off of a panel on the wall, of the inner wall of the spaceship, and does so. By the way, it's two different. It was sometimes he says he did it with a pipe. Sometimes he said he did it with a crowbar. So again, that's a humongous difference. Neither makes sense, but it's a giant difference in the two versions of that story. The story actually, I mentioned how it really starts getting told to Carey and to Moffat in 2002 and 2003, but Baca had been trotting it out a little while. He apparently went to sometime, I think about 1995. Remember, by this time he is a UFO enthusiast and he's going to conferences. He went and saw a UFO researcher named Donald Schmitt speak about Roswell in 1995. After the talk, he went up to Schmitt and he gave him kind of a quick rundown. He said, hey, back in 1940 something, we don't know.
Yeah.
He saw, I saw this spacecraft, I saw these aliens, it crashed, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, that Schmitt remembers him saying, Baca, I think it was Baca, said it happened in 1947.
Oh.
Same year as Roswell. Maybe not a coincidence because Schmitt was talking about Roswell and Baca knew Schmitt was very interested in Roswell. So, there's a third year it's at, not 45, 1946, but 1947. Schmitt did not pursue the story. My guess is he didn't see a very credible witness in front of him. Thomas Carey also did not follow up on Baca's story that was told to him back in 2002, 2003. And Carey he's a believer. He's written about Roswell in a pretty credulous way, but even he didn't want anything to do with this Baca story.
Yeah.
After he heard, way back then, not even knowing about all these discrepancies we just covered. Our next sort of scrutiny of the story is about this last-minute unlikely witness I mentioned. In 2010, when Paola Harris was investigating the story, she was interviewing Remy and Jose about writing it. And around this time, there's multiple versions of how this happened, but she came into contact with someone named William P. Billy Brophy.
Okay.
We will hear from Brophy. I'm not sure. Does that name ring a bell to you?
Yes.
Okay. So I've mentioned him before. When we do other UFO episodes, we'll hear from him again. Because Brophy is basically, he is someone who has injected himself into a variety of UFO stories since over the last 20 years or so. All of them are based on his not really very famous father, but his father who really was a military pilot back in these important times when Roswell and things like that were happening.
Yeah.
And so he just, it's like the greatest hits of the UFO stories, Brophy has injected his father into these. And my father said this and this, that happened. And since 2003, he's been writing letters to UFO publications saying, hey, my dad did this, my dad did that. He was a dead former military pilot, which he really was. And he'd been on the scene of all these different flying saucer and various alien crashes over the years. And so Trinity, and when he told these stories, he'd been telling these stories for years before 2009 and 10 when Harris was researching it and talking about this story.
Yeah.
Suddenly, in 2010, when he's talking to Harris, he remembers, there's another one. I've never mentioned it, sure. But in 1945, before any of the other stories he said his dad was involved with, because he basically started his dad's adventures with downed saucers in 47 with Roswell.
Yeah.
He said, no, in 45, there was another one. It was by the Trinity site. Yeah, that's the same thing you've been researching. Yeah, my dad was there. He said that Bill Brophy Sr. had told Harris that his dad was like in charge of the picking up the debris at some points. He also had him, because he was a pilot, he had him flying the bodies back to the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, where apparently all alien bodies are taken. It's kind of the morgue for aliens. And so he injected his dad into a pretty important part of the cover-up and the finding these aliens and looking at and studying these aliens. And hold on a second. Okay. Later versions he could tell is really weird because he then invents. I'm just going to say it because honestly, the man is probably, people who have talked to him think he really believes these things. It's a very good chance, sadly, that he's mentally ill.
Okay.
So in later versions, though, he said, oh, there was also another witness who saw this stuff from on high. I'm not even sure where, like up in the mountains. No one's quite sure. But he said this witness saw these things from above. And so and my dad knows about that or whatever, or maybe, and they saw all this happen. My dad supervising the debris and the army picking up the debris and stuff like that. They also saw Remy and Jose watching from behind the bushes, as Remy and Jose said they had done for day after day after day,
right,
as these operations by the army were going on to retrieve all the debris.
But
so he sort of said, no, I can verify what they're saying.
Yeah. But would a pilot be supervising the retrieval of a UFO crash?
I think it's just like, he first like, yeah, no, because most of his stories has his dad flying aliens and flying parts and things like that. But in this one, he said, no, he was also supervising. So
sure. Okay.
It's not great. It's kind of sad, but it's also damning because there's just no evidence whatsoever that the senior Brophy had anything to do with anything like this. His own brother, Billy's brother Sean, the other son, I think a little bit younger son of Bill Brophy, said that none of these things happened.
Yeah.
Their dad never talked about UFOs. There was one, he said, when he was flying over Georgia in 1950, he had seen something that he couldn't identify, but he wasn't a big UFO believer. He was an enthusiast. He never told either one of them about any of these adventures with flying alien bodies around the country. Nothing is true. It's just kind of sad. With the Brophy story, though, there came kind of another change to the version that told by Baca and Padilla, the overall story. Now, suddenly, after Brophy started talking to Paolo Harris, the two guys remembered that, the two old men remembered that they did, in fact, see the senior Brophy overseeing the debris site and the recovery of the craft, just like Billy said. That's right. Remember that guy. What did it look like? Oh, yeah, that was him. Yeah. He was in charge.
Yeah, that's
this
hilarious.
Is great. Our two stories totally dovetail. This is really working out. Thank you. This is great. The Brophy story, moreover, centers, remember, on a live alien being captured by the U.S. authorities and flown by his father. So the Brophy part of it said, no, one of those aliens lived.
Yeah.
And the U.S. government got a hold of it. And my dad flew that living alien being to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. This event appears in Baca and Padilla's 2011 book. Say the same thing. There was a live alien that this guy Brophy had flown back. Here's the thing. The Valle and Harris book, all gone. They ditched the live alien thing. Arguably, the single most important detail from this story, and told by a witness who they gave a lot, Brophy, who they rely on for lots of other things. Also, by the way, told by Baca and Padilla. But I guess Baca and Padilla were basing it on Brophy's story.
Right.
But still, Brophy is a critical witness for their book, Valle and Harris's book, but they leave out one of the most critical details that he claimed. I don't know the reason they did. I think my guess, totally supposition here, is that they thought, okay, that's too far.
Yeah.
We don't want to go. We want to overdo it here. We want people to believe this story.
Yeah.
That's my guess. But that's very weird that they would leave that out.
Yeah.
The fourth thing is the motivation for why Padilla and Baca were telling these stories, and that's fairly obvious.
Yeah.
Greed is not evidence of untruth, but honestly, it probably should be. It should probably be. In this case, though, Baca and Padilla, they did, why would they make up this crazy wild story, right?
Money and attention.
Of course.
Even if you're not going to get any money out of it, you're getting attention.
Here's the thing.
People are listening to you.
They absolutely were after money. People say that a lot.
Yeah.
I have become, my thing is follow money. Almost all these things are money. And in this case, and a lot of people do say that, and that is a motivation. It's like, sometimes it's just attention. Yeah. Bill Brophy is just attention. He's not making money out of this.
Yeah.
He just, he's also, again, maybe not there, but he is getting a lot of attention from this. With Baca and Padilla, though, it's really over. It's actually really crass and over the top. So by the early 2000s, when the two really started peddling the story too, they're overtly trying to tell other people. Remember, they would tell the reporter, they would tell Thomas Carey, the UFO researcher. UFOs were pretty hot in the 90s. Remember him in the 90s when he told the guy Schmidt, UFOs were very hot. Oh my God. We got to cut this out because my favorite show, my UFO show.
Oh, I don't know where your UFO show.
David Duchovny and Gillian.
Oh, X-Files.
X-Files. This is when, of course, X-Files came out, and it really
Yeah.
kind of ginned up interest in UFOs. That's building. In the early 2000s, UFOs are getting hotter still. Now they start trying to talk about to other researchers like Thomas Carey and the newspaper, the friendly journalists that they knew, and they really are starting to try to peddle the story to multiple different sources. In 2011, by that time, when they published their book, and then later when they talked to Harris and Vallée about it, we live in a world where you can make a lot of money from this. It's easier than ever to cash in off these kinds of stories. You have YouTube, you have social media, you have the conference circuit, and you have books.
Yeah.
And you can do little movies or things like that, or you can make a movie or a TV show as well. And that's exactly what Baca and Padilla tried to do. Paola Harris, the writer who relies on them for everything for the book she and Vallée wrote, who's been pushing the story now for 15 years, she's acknowledged that those guys were absolutely after the money. They were trying desperately to monetize everything about the story. She tells, in another version of how she got into the story, she says that there was a UFO enthusiast that she knew asked her to look into the story. He heard about somewhere, and she asked her to look in. Again, there's multiple ways that she got involved. It's a little weird.
Yeah.
So she says that she spoke to Baca and Padilla on a conference call together, kind of her initial calls with these guys after this guy said, hey, you should look into this story. Quote, right from the beginning, they asked for money. They didn't want to talk about anything unless we promised to give them thousands of dollars to excavate the alleged crash site, but they apparently did not even have rights to the site. I was already aware of the piece they claimed to have recovered, that's the artifact, and it did not have any indication of being anomalous. Without a compelling reason to consider their offer, we dropped it, quote unquote. Of course, she wouldn't drop it for long. The excavation site, that was apparently their first kind of scam. They thought, okay, we will give you permission or be advisors too in excavation. You guys, hey, that's why they were telling stories about the military effectively kicking in, just dumping a bunch of debris into a crevice or just burying it on site.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so they were telling that story because they said, hey, we can take you back there. We can help you find the site. This will be a huge thing, man. But you got to give us money for helping you with this excavation. That was their first.
What was their plan when there was nothing there?
Keep looking. Carrie, Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
People are still spending a shit ton of money looking for that. They've never found it. So, and they also remember they also wanted to make movies. Or one of the cousin, remember the cousin, the niece of Jose or Remy was looking for them to make a movie about it. So even Harris saw that she didn't go along with that, and by the way, that you heard that about the artifact.
Yeah.
So even Harris is expressing doubt. She doesn't anymore, not in the book, but initially she did. That piece of metal that Padilla claims to have pried from a panel in the ship, there's also a little bit more evolution to that story as well. And the guys clearly thought that was their other golden ticket. So we can do a book, we can help you, we can advise on this excavation, you need to pay us for that. But hey, guess what, Paola Harris? We have an actual alien technology in our possession, or actually at this time, that was when Remy was still alive. So we have this artifact. And Harris, quote, Remy Baca was pretty greedy. He wanted $250,000 for the piece, and he wanted $250,000 for the story. So, in other words, to write that book. Give me $250,000 to write the book. Give me $250,000. I'll give you this artifact. Quote back to Harris, and he doesn't know you can't copyright a story when it's in the public domain. End quote. So they had already told the story. They had told the story numerous times, and it's in a newspaper, it's in other books and things like that. And they're saying, hey, give us $250,000, we'll just write a book about us. I mean, it's just, it was ludicrous. So it's $500,000 if you're counting for a story that they had already told, and for a metal brace of some sort that they could not prove was anything other than terrestrial. So Thomas Carey, remember he got the first pitch from Baca and Padilla back in 2002 and 2003. He said the same thing. Thomas Carey, he didn't record all of the calls, so he didn't have this on tape. But he said, quote, I have a clear memory, unquote, of money being the motive. Quote, Baca asked me how he could make money with his story. I told him there really was not any way to make much money off it unless he could find some producer who wanted to make a film about it. Baca told me that he had already presented the story to Stanton Friedman. He's a very well-known UFO researcher. He's the main guy behind the modern Roswell telling, and some others without success. So he'd gotten a lot of people he had not been able to convince to help him make money on this story. Back to the quote from Carrie. When Baca pressed me on how he can make money on this story, that's when I finally made up my mind that I did not believe Baca's story, end quote.
Yeah.
So score one for an honest UFO researcher, Thomas J. Carey.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it is. So obviously, everybody he's talking to says, yeah, you're full of shit, until he came to talk to Paolo Harris, who then got, years later, would get Jacques Vallée involved. So there's tons of other issues. I'll go for them pretty quickly. That metal piece, remember from the avocado saucer that originally was a disc saucer?
Yeah.
It's a good segue, I think, to talk about some of the physical things that were wrong with their thing, and specifically that. Remember, he said this is an alien piece of technology. Harris and Vallée have backed that up. Off and on, they usually just repeat that and make that claim in their book. No. There's no evidence. Padilla would say, oh, I had a lab person, an expert, look at it, and he said, I find no evidence of Earth manufacture on this thing. That's just an unnamed person, right?
Yeah.
So over the years, it's been seen by 3 or 4 actual experts with names in labs, and they have shown it. I won't bore you with it, but it's basically aluminum alloy. We know exactly, it's like aluminum and selenium and copper. It's just totally earthbound components to it, and it was manufactured using metric dimensions, a very earthbound unit of measurement. It almost certainly was made in Mexico.
Well, wait, how do they know it was manufactured using metric dimensions?
You can tell by the ratios that, what unit of measurements it was used.
Okay.
And also, and by the way, this is where the claim from Baca and Padilla that they pried it off of a wall kind of comes back to haunt them, because they could say, oh, our bad. The soldiers must have left it. So it was, made by humans. Sorry about that. We take takesies backsies. Yeah. You can't say that, though, when your claim is that you literally used a crowbar to pry it off of, it was attached. Jacques Vallée has later said, just tries to excuse this. Maybe I can imagine the soldiers were using it for some kind of power source, and they attached it to the. Oh my! Seriously,
okay.
You're gonna mess up this alien technology by soldering something to it? It's embarrassing. So it actually hurts them. The really exciting detail of sneaking in and prying it loose. It kind of hurts you when we now know that artifact that you were trying to sell for $250,000 is for sure fake.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of other logical holes to it. Things like, would the military really bury alien space material on site? Of course they wouldn't. Yeah. Would they leave their spaceship under a tarp, or leave space debris in a truck to go party, or just disappear? No one knows where they went. It's just not one soldier left behind to mind these insanely valuable, important, earth-shattering historical artifacts.
Yeah.
How did it take 10 days to get a spaceship onto a truck? Remember the truck? The spaceship was whole. Yeah. It was just under a tarp. You weren't disassembling it or anything like that.
And it wasn't huge.
No. Yeah. How's it take 10 days? Yeah. So
they had to build a fence or something?
That's true. They had to build a fence and a road.
And a road.
There. So
there you go.
I'll take that one back. There's no contemporaneous reports of this whatsoever.
Yeah.
We've seen lots and lots and lots of top secret things from that era.
Yeah.
Nothing about this whatsoever in any document, any government document whatsoever. I mean, they built a freaking road. No contemporaneous newspaper reports either. Remember, Roswell had some newspaper coverage.
Yeah.
Right? It was a weather balloon. There's nothing in 1945 coverage about this at all.
Even when they said it was a weather balloon.
They said it was a weather balloon, and they built a goddamn road to the site. That's a local newsworthy event.
Yeah.
And the weather balloon, by the way, I think that was just Roswell.
Yeah.
I think when Roswell became a thing, they said, "Oh, weather balloon, that'll sound authentic."
Yeah.
Again, they're not good. And then, like you could say about almost all of these things, or most of them, with Roswell, people did allegedly come forward later on. The nurse the mortuary guy in the Roswell story. In this story, no one ever, not one soldier, not one, I don't know, technician or something like that, who was there with the debris, not one pilot, except his crazy son, no one at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, no one has ever said, oh, this was from a 1945 event near Trinity in New Mexico. Not anyone. And not in the 25 years since it's been kind of a matter of public record. That's almost 25 years. That's highly unlikely. So we're left then with a story that has absolutely no evidence to support it, that it was told by, let's be honest, proven liars. It carries clear evidence that it was manufactured with all those, the evolutions and the changes and the contradictions, and that it was very clearly motivated by greed, by trying to cash in on this story. All those things going against it. Going forward, honestly, is literally nothing. There's nothing but the word of these two people who know are liars who are trying to make money off it. So, I mean, it's weird that it's you know, just knowing about any of the changes from telling one to telling two, and the improbabilities, all this, the obvious false statements, the physical, the one physical artifact being proven false. It's just crazy that people believe this. Other than Harrison Valley, and they are the champions of it, there are some people in the UFO world who don't believe it. It's not absolutely universally believed, but it is. It's trotted out. It has become a big kind of, not exhibit A in the case for extraterrestrial visitations, but an exhibit in the case for that. And in the media, the New York Times, which people don't realize, the New York Times is very pro-UFO, has done some really? Atrocious reporting on UFOs. And they did a story they ran in January 2023 that just hook, line, and sinker about the whole story.
Really?
It's humiliating. Just an embarrassment. This staid newspaper of record is absolutely... So the New York Times swallowed the story whole. Harris and Vallée have continued to flog the story. And they just increasingly tortured rationales for it. I won't go into a lot of too much detail on that. Harris, she still believes and still says that the whole Baca being involved with Dixie Lee Ray, the governor of Washington, is all true. It's just embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's unquestionably a lie. There's not just no evidence for it. There's positive evidence that
against
it's a lie.
it. Yeah.
And where he got the story, that he literally just plagiarized that guy's memoir.
Yeah.
And also Harris calls herself an expert on exopolitics.
Yeah.
We're done with her.
There is that.
Jacques Vallée, he has historically had some credibility. I would argue this is badly, badly damaging his credibility, because he's just, again, ludicrous. He's defended it. He still continues to defend it. It's embarrassing. It just tortured explanations and excuses for everything. It doesn't make him out to be a honest, open-minded, truth-seeking researcher, if he ever was one. Eddie Apodaca, here, I'll give you one example. The Eddie Apodaca, which has been proven he cannot have been there at the time. His part in the story is complete fiction. It has to be. Vallée's essentially his excuse for that is that, well, there's lots of Apodacas in New Mexico. Maybe it was a different one. It's not. It's Eddie Apodaca. It's the person we know. He's a real person. He was alive when they first started telling the story. He was a family friend. He is the specific state trooper that they said, literally. It's like if I told you that Ted Cruz's dad killed John F. Kennedy, and then you show me evidence that Ted Cruz's dad was in Canada at the time and could not have been in Dallas at the time of the assassination, and I respond to you, well, there's lots of Cruzes in Texas, Carrie. So ipso facto, I'm telling the truth. It's literally that, not even logic. It's embarrassing. I'm desperately trying to hang on to this thing that I wrote a book about, and I am making money from. He just has ludicrous excuses. But he also, by the way, Vallée says that there's been half a dozen, quote unquote, alien crash landings in the state of New Mexico.
Well, there's something. There's like metals in the ground that they're attracted to or something.
So New Mexico is the Bermuda Triangle for alien pilots or something like that?
There you go. Yeah, clearly.
I don't know. It's kind of embarrassing. And by the way, and he, like, all the contradictions and lies that Padilla and Baca have been caught in, he says it's like, It's just there's some quote lost documents, and it's just human frailty. It's just being human. Like we're all trying to write a memoir to get on Oprah's Book of the Month Club. We're all lying. We're all forgetting about things. So, but it doesn't shake the core fundamental truth of this story. Is what he's basically saying.
Yeah,
that's horrible. And he says, this is minor things. Quote, as for us, we will fix the few inaccuracies Mr. Johnson has noticed and quietly resume the analyses of the patterns that continue to shape our present concept of the phenomenon. You'll notice that last part is just complete bullshit. It's just word salad.
Yes.
But, essentially, no, you're not fixing any inaccuracy. And it's just sort of poo-poo. So anyways, it's like, here's this story. We wrote about it. There's this barrage of proof that it's not true. And it's just, stop nitpicking. It's a couple of things. It doesn't change the basic core of this truthful story, which again, flip it.
Yeah.
Start it from, here's a false story and here's all the reasons false. Now you tell me why it's true.
Yeah.
Flip that. You would have nothing. There'd be a mountain on the left side and literally, because these two guys said so. Honestly.
Yeah.
And then later on the third guy, who we know is mentally unstable, he said so too. That's literally what you have.
Yeah.
Harris even said something like that.
To be honest, that's every UFO story.
That's true. But you might really. What if you really did have an artifact? What if you really did have something that was provable? What if you had something like that?
Well, that would be fantastic.
That'd be wonderful.
Does anybody have anything like that from any story? No.
Any kind of corroboration whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's literally nothing here.
Other stories
whatsoever
do have lots of other people
like that,
say, I saw something. I saw,
So this is honestly, this is one of the worst, dumbest, weakest UFO stories I've ever heard in my life. And yet here we are at a time now, we have congressional hearings about UFOs and things like that. And as I mentioned back in part one, you have this congressional commanded report that the Pentagon has to do, looking at all documents about UFO and sightings and about crash and landings. And they pointedly changed the timeline of that from 47 to present to 1945 to present, the indication being that it's this goddamn story that had Mike Gallagher, the congressman, change that timeline from 47 to 45. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
That's this ludicrous, ridiculous, utterly false, clearly palpable hoax that it is.
Yeah.
And a badly done one at that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this UFOs, UAPs, whatever we call them, I think they are absolutely worthy of very serious examination and study. And I applaud the government is starting to do that. This is not that, though. This is not a serious investigation whatsoever. We can do better. You, my fellow UFO interested people out there in the world, you have to demand that, though.
Yeah.
If you accept being lied to, then you will be. Yeah. And this is one of those instances of that. So if you accept stories like this, you're not being serious, you're not helping. Yeah. Is all I'm going to say. Okay. So if you want me to speak at UFO conference, I'm available.
weirdworldpodcast@gmail.com.
Probably won't be invited.
I'll schedule them.
Okay. So that's the story of the Trinity UFO crash landing case. It's a great story.
Yeah, the initial story is very entertaining and fun.
It's
just
really
because,
story. If you just admitted it was fiction, we'd be good.
It's also a little silly.
It is, but that'd be
I know
cool.
that.
You have it crash land right after the atomic bomb.
And the 7-year-old and the 9-year-old out there on their horses.
Driving a truck.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big fan of feral children stories.
Oh, we all love them. I know you do. So, hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, Dean. And thanks for listening.